The ballroom doors slammed open so hard the chandeliers shook, and Garrett Hale's name froze in the auctioneer's mouth mid-sentence. Every head turned. Every phone stopped mid-scroll. Because standing in the doorway in a red silk dress that caught every light in the room was the wife he said wouldn't dare show up. Allison didn't run. She didn't cry. She just stood there holding a slim envelope like it belonged in a courtroom, not a charity gala, and smiled. What kind of husband lies about a gala being canceled while cameras are rolling? Have you ever felt your stomach warn you before you had proof? That sick twist right below your ribs that whispers something is wrong before your brain catches up? That's what Allison felt 3 days ago when Garrett kissed her forehead and said the event was off. Too smooth, too fast, too final. And now she's here, in downtown Chicago, at the same fundraiser he swore was canceled. Watching her husband, the public family man, the hospital donor, the guy who posts about marriage on social media, walk in with another woman on his arm. The woman is younger, taller, louder. She laughs like she owns him, and Garrett lets her. But Allison isn't watching her. She's watching the room, the donors, the board members, the journalists with phones already recording. She knows exactly how many seconds it takes for a lie to become a headline. Comment the country you're watching from. If your spouse said an event was canceled, would you show up anyway? The last time Garrett touched her like he meant it was 6 months ago. Warm hands on her waist in their kitchen. But his eyes were already cold. Already somewhere else. She remembers the weight of his palms, the way her body used to lean into him out of habit. Out of hope. Academy. Allison steps forward now, heels sharp on marble, envelope steady in her hand, and she smiles like she already won. Because she did. 3 days earlier, their house smelled like coffee and lies. Allison stood at the kitchen counter folding cloth napkins for a dinner she'd been planning for weeks. Their anniversary dinner. While Garrett scrolled through his phone with his jaw tight. He didn't look up when he spoke. The gala's off. She stopped mid-fold. What? Cancelled. Donor pulled out last minute. Whole thing's a mess. Monica's furious. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. Calm. Bored. Practiced. Allison's stomach dropped, but she kept her face still. That's awful. You were looking forward to it. Yeah, well, he shrugged, still not looking at her. Probably for the best. Gives me time to prep for the Detroit meeting. There was a new cologne on his collar. Sharp. Expensive. Not the one she bought him last Christmas. She noticed it when he leaned past her to grab his keys. The scent didn't belong in their home, didn't belong on his skin, and her body knew it before her mind did. That night he reached for her in bed. Not because he wanted her, because it was routine. His hand slid across her waist, pulling her close like muscle memory. Allison didn't pull away. She turned slightly, just enough to see his face in the dark. Just enough to measure him. To study the man she married and ask herself when he stopped being real with her. His breathing evened out. He fell asleep first like he always did, like he had nothing to worry about. Allison lay there staring at the ceiling, her pulse loud in her ears. She replayed his words. The gala's off. Donor pulled out. Monica's furious. Every sentence landed too clean, too rehearsed, like he'd been practicing in the car. She waited until his hand went slack on her hip. Then she slipped out of bed and walked to the closet. The dress was still there, hanging in the back behind winter coats she hadn't touched in months. Red silk. Tags still on. She'd bought it 6 weeks ago for the gala, the one he just said was canceled. Her fingers brushed the fabric, and her throat tightened. She didn't cry. She pulled out her phone and opened the Hospital Foundation's website, scrolled to the events page, and there it was. The gala, still listed, still scheduled, still selling tickets. V'd. Her hands shook, but not from fear, from clarity. Garrett wasn't protecting her from a canceled event. He was protecting himself from her presence. Allison stood in that closet for a long time, holding the dress against her chest, feeling the cool silk against her skin. She thought about all the mornings she made him coffee, all the dinners she plated while he worked late, all the smiles she gave donors and board members while standing beside him like a good wife. A quiet wife, A wife who didn't ask too many questions. She thought about the woman he must have invited instead. The one who smelled like that cologne. The one who made him lie so smoothly he barely blinked. Allison put the dress back, carefully, like she was handling evidence, because that's exactly what it was. She walked back to bed, slipped under the covers, and lay beside the man who thought she was simple. The man who thought canceled was enough. The man who had no idea she was already 3 steps ahead. Garrett's phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text lit up the screen for half a second before it went dark. "See you Friday. Wear the blue tie." Allison closed her eyes and smiled in the dark. Allison didn't rage. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything or make a scene. That's not how you win. That's how you lose control, and control was the only thing she had left. Academy. The next morning, she made breakfast like nothing happened. Eggs, toast, fresh coffee. Garrett came downstairs already dressed, already halfway out the door. He kissed her forehead without looking at her. "Detroit trip might run long," he said. "Don't wait up Friday." "Okay." She handed him his coffee, smiled, watched him leave. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and opened her laptop. Allison wasn't the kind of wife people noticed. She didn't interrupt meetings or demand attention. She folded hospital donation mailers with Garrett's face on them while board members talked over her. She smiled in photos while donors shook his hand and forgot to ask her name. She was the background, the accessory, the good wife who stayed quiet and looked grateful. But quiet doesn't mean stupid. She pulled up their joint account, scrolled through months of transactions. Hotel charges in cities Garrett said were quick day trips. Restaurants she'd never been to. Florists. Jewelry stores. A charge for 2 tickets to a private rooftop event in December. She was home alone that night watching old movies and eating leftovers. Her jaw tightened, but her hands stayed steady. She opened a new folder on her desktop. Labeled it Anniversary Plans. Innocent. Harmless. Then she started dragging files into it. Screenshots of charges. Calendar events that didn't match his stories. Receipts she'd saved over the months because she had a feeling. That sick, stomach-twisting feeling that always came before proof. She pulled up a photo from 2 years ago. Their anniversary trip to Michigan. Garrett's arms around her waist on the beach. Her head on his shoulder. She remembered that version of him. The one who used to kiss her neck in the kitchen and pull her close when she walked past. The one who made her feel wanted. That man was gone. Or maybe he was never real. Allison stared at the photo until her eyes burned. She felt the ache in her chest. The longing for something that didn't exist anymore. Then she closed it, saved it in the folder, and kept working. She wasn't collecting memories. She was collecting evidence. By noon, she had a timeline. By 3 p.m., she had matched charges to dates Garrett said he was working late. By evening, she had a spreadsheet that would make an accountant weep. She printed one thing. The receipt from the anniversary dinner reservation she'd made at his favorite restaurant 6 months ago. The one he canceled last minute because of a board emergency. The one she kept because she wanted to reschedule. The one that proved she tried harder than he ever did. Allison folded it carefully and slipped it into her wallet. Then she opened a new browser tab and searched for divorce attorneys who specialized in high-net-worth cases. Not because she was ready, because she wanted to know what winning looked like. Academy. She didn't cry. She didn't call a friend. She didn't pour a glass of wine and spiral. She sat at that kitchen table in the house they bought together, in the life they built together, and she planned. Her phone buzzed. A reminder. Gala, Friday 7 p.m. She'd added it to her calendar weeks ago when Garrett first mentioned it. Back when he was still pretending to include her. Back when he didn't know she checked everything. Allison looked at the dress hanging in the closet. Then she looked at the folder on her screen. And she made a decision. If he wanted her to stay home and stay quiet, he should have married someone else. Brielle Sutton didn't fall in love with Garrett Hale. She fell in love with what he could do for her. She met him at a donor luncheon 8 months ago. Back when he still wore his wedding ring and pretended to care about boundaries. He was charming, successful, connected, And married to a woman Brielle decided wasn't competition the second she saw her. Quiet, modest Allison in her simple dress and nervous smile, standing beside Garrett like she was apologizing for taking up space. Brielle didn't apologize for anything. By the third business dinner, Garrett stopped mentioning his wife. By the fifth, he stopped going home on time. By the seventh, Brielle had him exactly where she wanted him. Academy. Now, Thursday night, Garrett stood in her apartment with his tie loose and his face tight. Brielle leaned against the kitchen counter in a black silk robe, swirling wine in a glass and watching him like a cat watches something it's about to knock off a table. "You're bringing me tomorrow," she said. "Not a question. A fact." Garrett rubbed his face. "Brielle, don't Brielle me." She set the glass down, slow and controlled. "You told her it was cancelled. That means you're mine tomorrow night. Unless you lied to me too." "I didn't lie to you." His voice dropped, trying to sound firm. But Brielle heard the crack underneath. "Good." She crossed the room, heels clicking on hardwood. She stopped in front of him, close enough that he had to look down at her. Close enough that the space between them felt like a dare. "Because if I find out you're playing both sides, Garrett, I'll make sure the whole city knows what kind of man you really are." He exhaled through his nose. "You wouldn't." She smiled. "Slow, sweet, dangerous. Try me." Brielle reached up and straightened his tie, her fingers moving deliberately, claiming him with every small touch. She pulled the knot tighter than it needed to be, then smoothed her hands down his chest like she was marking territory. Garrett's breath hitched. He hated how easily she controlled him. Hated how much he wanted her anyway. "You're going to walk in with me tomorrow night," Brielle said, her voice soft but sharp. "You're going to introduce me to Monica, to the board, to everyone who matters. And you're going to make it clear that I'm not just some event guest. And if I don't?" She tilted her head, her smile widening. "Then I'll tell your wife exactly how many hotel rooms you've paid for. Exactly how many times you said you loved me. Exactly how you told me she's boring in bed." Garrett's jaw clenched. "I never said that. Does it matter?" Brielle laughed, light and cruel. "People believe what sounds true, Garrett. And I sound very convincing." He should have walked out. He should have ended it months ago. But Brielle made him feel powerful in a way Allison never did. Allison asked him about his day and listened too carefully. Allison made him coffee and kissed him like she still believed in him. It was exhausting. Brielle didn't believe in him. She believed in what he could give her. And that was easier. "Fine," he said. "You're coming." Brielle's smile softened into something almost affectionate. Almost. She leaned up and kissed him, slow and possessive, tasting like wine and victory. When she pulled back, her lipstick was on his mouth, and she didn't wipe it off. "Good boy," she whispered. Garrett left her apartment 20 minutes later, his shirt wrinkled and his mind racing. He sat in his car in the parking garage, staring at his phone. No missed calls. No texts. Allison wasn't checking on him anymore. He told himself that was a good thing. He told himself his wife wouldn't dare show up. Brielle stood at her window, watching his car pull away, and whispered to her reflection, "Your wife won't dare show up." She had no idea how wrong she was. Friday morning came slow and quiet. Allison woke up alone. Garrett left early for a breakfast meeting that probably didn't exist. She didn't ask, didn't text, didn't care. She made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, opened her laptop one last time and reviewed everything. The timeline, the receipts, the screenshots, the carefully organized folder that contained 6 months of lies in 12 neat files. Then she printed one document, a single page, folded it carefully, slipped it into a slim envelope that looked expensive and serious. The kind of envelope that makes people nervous when they see it. She set it on the counter and stared at it for a long time. If she went tonight, there was no going back. If she walked into that ballroom, she couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't smile through donor events. Couldn't stand beside Garrett and play the role of the good wife who didn't ask questions. But she was tired of pretending. She was tired of being the woman people overlooked. The woman Garrett lied to without a second thought. The woman Brielle dismissed as boring and safe and not worth worrying about. Allison walked to the closet and pulled out the dress. Red silk. Tags still attached. She'd never worn it. Never had the chance. It was supposed to be for their anniversary dinner, the one Garrett canceled. The one she planned for weeks while he planned ways to avoid her. She tried it on in front of the mirror. Slowly. One arm, then the other. Zipper sliding up her back with a soft hiss. The fabric clung in all the right places. Elegant but powerful. It didn't look like something a quiet wife would wear. It looked like something a woman wore when she was done being quiet. Allison turned, studying herself from every angle. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because she looked different, because she felt different. Stronger, certain, like she'd been holding her breath for months and finally decided to exhale. She pulled the tags off one by one. Each one felt like cutting a cord. If she was wrong, if Garrett really did cancel on everyone, if the gala really wasn't happening, she'd walk into an empty ballroom and humiliate herself. She'd be the paranoid wife who couldn't trust her husband, the unstable woman who made a scene over nothing. But if she was right, Allison's hands shook as she reached for her makeup. Not from fear, from adrenaline, from the electric, terrifying clarity that comes right before you do something you can't undo. Academy. She applied lipstick the color of a warning. Red. Bold. She fastened her earrings. Small diamonds Garrett gave her on their wedding day. She wanted him to recognize them. Wanted him to remember what he promised her once. She slipped on heels that made her 3 inches taller and 10 times more dangerous. Then she walked to the kitchen, picked up the envelope, and held it like a weapon. Her phone buzzed. A text from Monica Fairchild, the foundation director. Looking forward to seeing you tonight, Allison. Your donation pledge means everything. Allison smiled. She sprayed perfume on her wrists. The one Garrett used to love. The one he'd lean into when they danced in their living room years ago. Back when he still touched her like she mattered. She wasn't wearing it for him. She was wearing it for herself. For the version of her that used to believe love was enough. For the version that finally learned it wasn't. Allison grabbed her keys, her purse, and the envelope that would change everything. She took one last look at the house, at the life she built with a man who stopped seeing her. Then she walked out the door and drove straight into the fire. The locked folder appeared 3 weeks before the gala, buried inside Garrett's laptop that he left open one Sunday morning. Allison wasn't snooping. She was looking for a hospital contact list he promised to send her. But when she clicked his desktop, a folder labeled GT Development caught her eye. She clicked it. Password protected. She tried their anniversary. Wrong. She tried his birthday. Wrong. She tried Brielle's name as a test. Still wrong. But the fact that it was locked told her everything she needed to know. Allison took a photo of the folder name with her phone, closed the laptop, and went back to folding laundry like nothing happened. She didn't confront him, didn't ask questions. She just filed the information away and kept watching. 2 days later, she called Garrett's assistant to confirm a donation statement for tax purposes. The assistant, always polite, always helpful, suddenly couldn't find the file. "I'll have to get back to you, Mrs. Hale." But she never did. That's when Allison knew she needed help. She made an appointment with an attorney. Not a divorce attorney. Not yet. Just someone who specialized in financial contracts and marital assets. Someone who could tell her what she was looking at without making her feel stupid for not seeing it sooner. The attorney's office was downtown, quiet and professional. Dark wood furniture. Soft lighting. A woman named Caroline Grant with sharp eyes and a calm voice that made Allison feel like she could finally breathe. Caroline didn't ask why Allison was there. She just slid a legal pad across the desk and said, "Start from the beginning." Allison talked for 30 minutes. The gala lie, the locked folder, the missing statements, the business trips that felt too frequent, the cologne that didn't belong. Caroline took notes without interrupting, her pen moving steadily across the paper. When Allison finished, Caroline looked up and said one sentence that changed everything. "Illinois has an infidelity clause in prenuptial agreements. If yours has one, and if we can prove breach, He loses a lot more than his reputation. Allison's breath caught. She'd signed a prenup 7 years ago. She remembered the meeting. Garrett's lawyer, a stack of papers, Garrett's hand on her knee telling her it was just a formality. She signed because she loved him, because she trusted him, because she didn't think she'd ever need to read the fine print. "I forgot about that," Allison whispered. Caroline's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Most people do. That's what they count on." Allison felt something shift inside her chest. Not anger, not sadness. Relief. The sick, exhausting feeling of being gaslit for months finally had a name, finally had a solution. Caroline leaned forward, her tone steady and protective. "If you want to move forward, we do this carefully. We gather everything. We don't react. We don't warn him. We build a case so clean he can't buy his way out of it." Allison nodded, her hands shaking slightly in her lap. Caroline reached across the desk and covered Allison's hand with hers for just a second. Steady, grounding, the kind of touch that didn't ask for anything, just offered support. It was the first time in months someone touched Allison without expecting something in return. The first time she felt protected instead of patronized. The first time she felt like someone was standing with her instead of over her. Babisco. "Do you have access to joint accounts?" Caroline asked, pulling her hand back and picking up her pen again. "Yes." "Good. Start pulling statements. Quietly. Don't change your routine. Don't let him know you're looking." Allison left that office with a plan, a folder, and a clause Garrett forgot existed. One that punishes betrayal with more than just guilt. It happened at a small donor brunch 2 weeks before the gala, in front of people who barely knew their names. Allison was talking to an older couple about the Foundation's literacy program, something she actually knew about because she'd volunteered there for 3 years. She mentioned a statistic, something about reading levels in underserved schools. And Garrett's hand landed on her shoulder, firm and cold. "Actually, it's 32%, not 37. His voice was smooth, polite, but it carried. The couple looked at Allison, then at Garrett, their smiles freezing in place. Allison's stomach dropped. She wasn't wrong. She'd reviewed the report herself last week. But Garrett kept talking, steering the conversation away from her, like she was a child who'd interrupted the adults. She laughed, light, polite, like it didn't bother her. "You're right. I must have mixed up the numbers." But inside, something shut off. Something that used to care what he thought. Something that used to want his approval. The couple nodded and moved on to safer topics, and Garrett's hand stayed on Allison's shoulder for another 5 seconds before he finally let go. It wasn't affection. It was control. A reminder that he was the one people listened to, and she was just there to smile and look supportive. Allison excused herself to the restroom and stood in front of the mirror, gripping the counter until her knuckles went white. She didn't cry. She just stared at her reflection and asked herself when she started shrinking to make him feel bigger. Later, in the car on the way home, Garrett's hand landed on her thigh. Casual. Automatic. The way it always did when they were alone. But this time it felt different. Felt like performance. Like he was playing the role of affectionate husband because that's what the script called for. Allison removed his hand gently, smiling as if nothing happened. She placed it back on the steering wheel and looked out the window, her pulse loud in her ears. Garrett didn't notice. Or he pretended not to. He kept talking about the brunch, about the donations, about the upcoming gala that he'd already decided she wouldn't attend. Allison nodded in the right places, made sounds of agreement, and mentally reviewed the list of documents she still needed to copy. When they got home, Garrett kissed her forehead and said he had calls to make. Allison went to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and opened her phone. Contesimal. A text was waiting. From Monica Fairchild, the foundation director. "Allison, confirming your attendance at Friday's gala. Looking forward to seeing you there. Your support means everything." Allison stared at the message for a long time. Monica didn't know the gala was canceled. Monica was expecting her, which meant Garrett's lie wasn't about a donor pulling out or an event falling apart. It was just about keeping Allison away. She typed a response, her fingers steady. "Wouldn't miss it. See you Friday. Then she scrolled to her calendar and double-checked the details. Chicago Mercy Foundation Gala. Michigan Avenue. 7 p.m. black tie. She took a screenshot, added it to the folder labeled Anniversary Plans. Then she walked upstairs and pulled the red dress out of the closet one more time. Distribution. Garrett was in his office on a call, his voice low and smooth, probably talking to Brielle. Allison stood in the doorway for a second, watching him. He looked so sure of himself, so certain she'd stay in her lane, so confident she'd never dare challenge him in public. Coverage. He had no idea what was coming. Allison's phone buzzed again. Another text, this time with the gala location, time, and full donor lineup. She smiled and went to bed early. The envelope sat on the passenger seat the entire drive to downtown Chicago, and Allison couldn't stop looking at it. It was thin, simple, cream-colored paper with nothing written on the outside. But inside was one printed page that could end her marriage in front of 500 people, and the weight of that decision pressed against her chest like a hand. She drove slowly, rehearsing nothing. She didn't practice what she'd say, didn't plan a speech, didn't imagine dramatic confrontations. She was done performing. Tonight, she was just going to show up and let the truth do the work. Contessimo. Michigan Avenue glowed under streetlights, the kind of polished, expensive glow that made everything look cleaner than it was. Cars lined up at the hotel valet, doors opening, cameras flashing, men in tailored suits and women in gowns that cost more than most people's rent. Allison pulled up behind a black Mercedes and waited her turn. Her hands were steady on the wheel, but her pulse was loud in her ears. She could still turn around. She could still go home, take off the dress, and pretend she never saw the lies stacking up in her inbox. Distribution. But she didn't. The valet opened her door, and she stepped out into the cool Chicago night. Heels on pavement, red dress catching every light, envelope in hand like it belonged there. She didn't rush. She walked toward the entrance like she'd been invited, because she had been. Monica Fairchild sent her the details herself. Garrett just didn't know that. Inside, the ballroom was exactly what she expected. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, round tables draped in white with gold accents. Donors in clusters holding wine glasses and talking in low, important voices. The kind of event where everyone pretended wealth was normal and problems were something that happened to other people. Allison scanned the room, her eyes moving past faces she recognized from charity events and hospital tours. She saw Monica near the stage, talking to a man in a navy suit. She saw board members she'd smiled at 100 times while they looked past her. And then she saw him. Garrett stood near the bar, laughing at something a woman beside him said. The woman was tall, blonde, wearing a dress that looked like it was painted on. She touched his arm when she talked, leaning in too close, staking a claim Allison recognized immediately. Brielle. Allison's stomach twisted, but not with jealousy. With confirmation. With the sick, cold clarity of being right about something you desperately wanted to be wrong about. She imagined the moment Garrett would see her, the way his face would change, the way his breath would catch, the way his eyes would go wide with panic, then anger, then fear. She hated that the thought still warmed her skin, hated that some part of her still wanted him to notice her, still wanted him to remember what he threw away. But that wasn't why she was here. She was here because lies have expiration dates, and his just ran out. Allison took a breath, adjusted the envelope in her hand, and started walking toward the tables. She didn't look at Garrett, didn't look at Brielle. She just moved through the room like she owned it because tonight, she kind of did. Contessimo. Monica spotted her first. Her face lit up, and she waved Allison over. Allison, I'm so glad you made it. Allison smiled, calm, controlled. I wouldn't miss it. From across the room, the auctioneer's voice crackled through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize one of our most dedicated supporters, Garrett Hale. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Heads turned, cameras lifted, and that's when Garrett finally saw her. Garrett froze mid-smile, his hand still raised in a polite wave to the crowd, and his eyes locked on Allison like she was a ghost. For 3 full seconds, he didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at his wife standing 20 feet away in the red dress he didn't know she owned, holding an envelope he didn't know existed. Brielle noticed the shift immediately. She followed his gaze, her smile faltering when she saw Allison. "Is that?" "Yeah." Garrett's voice came out tight, strangled. He forced his face back into a smile and lowered his hand, trying to look unbothered. But his jaw was locked, and Brielle could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. Babisco. "You said she wouldn't come." Brielle's voice dropped, sharp and accusing. "She wasn't supposed to." Garrett's eyes stayed on Allison, tracking her movement through the room like a predator watching prey that just walked into the wrong territory. Coverage. Allison didn't look at him. She was talking to Monica, calm and engaged, like she belonged there more than he did. Monica laughed at something Allison said, touched her arm warmly, and gestured toward a group of donors nearby. Brielle squeezed Garrett's arm hard enough to hurt. "Fix this." But Garrett didn't know how to fix it, because Allison wasn't making a scene. She wasn't crying or yelling or demanding attention. She was just there, present, poised, and somehow that was worse. Across the room, Allison moved through conversations like she'd been doing this her whole life. A board member asked her opinion on the new pediatric wing. A donor mentioned a grant application. Another woman complimented her dress and asked where she got it. Allison answered every question with ease. She didn't list credentials or try to prove herself. She just spoke and people leaned in. They listened. They remembered her name this time. Contessimal. Monica stayed close, introducing Allison to people who'd ignored her for years. "This is Allison Hale. She's been instrumental in our literacy outreach program. Allison's family trust has been a quiet pillar of this foundation for years. You should hear her thoughts on accessible healthcare models." Each introduction was a small reclaiming. Each conversation was proof that Allison had always been more than Garrett's accessory. People just hadn't bothered to notice. Garrett watched it all from across the room, his stomach twisting. He watched men shake Allison's hand and hold it a second too long. Watched women smile at her with genuine warmth instead of polite distance. Watched her laugh, real, unguarded laughter. In a way she hadn't laughed with him in months. Distribution. He realized, with a sick drop in his chest, that he'd been wrong about her. She wasn't simple. She wasn't forgettable. She was just done pretending to be small so he could feel big. Brielle pulled him toward a group of investors, trying to salvage the night. But she was off. She called one man by the wrong name, made a joke about charity cases that landed with cold silence, touched Garrett's chest too familiarly in front of people who knew he was married. Every misstep made Garrett more tense. Every wrong word made him wish he'd come alone. Or better, wish he'd brought Allison like he was supposed to. Then Monica's voice cut through the room. "Allison, come here for a second. I want you to meet someone." Allison excused herself and followed Monica toward the front of the ballroom, closer to the microphone, closer to the stage, closer to the center of everything Garrett wanted to control. Brielle's grip on Garrett's arm tightened. "She's going to ruin this." Garrett didn't answer, because deep down he knew Brielle was right. Started as a whisper, but the microphone caught it anyway. Brielle stood near a cocktail table, wine glass in hand, talking to 2 other women in gowns that screamed money but whispered insecurity. She thought she was being quiet. She thought the mic on stage was far enough away. She was wrong. "That's his wife." Brielle's voice was light, mocking, just loud enough to carry. "I heard she couldn't even keep him interested." Garrett said she just lies there, no passion, no effort. "Honestly, I'd leave too." The women laughed, nervous, uncomfortable, but they laughed, and the room heard it. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Phones came out. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring settled over the ballroom like a held breath. Allison was 10 feet away, standing beside Monica. She heard every word, felt every eye shift to her, waiting to see if she'd cry, if she'd run, if she'd crumble under the weight of public humiliation. She didn't. She turned slowly, her face calm, her voice steady. She didn't yell. didn't flinch. She just looked at Brielle and said one sentence that cut deeper than anything screamed ever could. If I'm so insignificant, why did you need to lie to be here? The silence went nuclear. Brielle's face flushed. The women beside her stepped back slightly, distancing themselves like Brielle had just become radioactive. Garrett's eyes went wide, his mouth opening to say something, but no sound came out. Distribution. Allison didn't wait for a response. She just held Brielle's gaze for 3 long seconds, then turned back to Monica like nothing happened. Like Brielle wasn't even worth the energy it took to stay angry. But the room wasn't done. Donors whispered. Board members exchanged looks. A journalist in the back corner pulled out her phone and started typing. The story was already writing itself, and Garrett could feel his reputation cracking in real time. Be honest, would you walk out or would you stand there and finish it? Garrett moved without thinking. He crossed the room toward Allison, his body pulling him toward her on instinct. He wanted to touch her, wanted to pull her close and apologize and beg her to let him fix this in private, away from cameras and donors and judgment. But when he reached her, Allison didn't move. She just stood there, still and controlled, looking at him like he was a stranger. Like the man she married died months ago and she'd already buried him. Allison. His voice cracked, desperate, pleading. Don't. She didn't yell, didn't cry, just said the word like a period at the end of a sentence that was already over. Garrett's hand lifted slightly, reaching for her wrist, wanting contact, wanting something that felt like forgiveness. But Allison stepped back, smooth and deliberate, denying him even the comfort of her anger. The room watched. Every donor, every board member, every person who thought they knew Garrett Hale as the family man, the philanthropist, the guy who posted about marriage and morals on social media. Contesimal. And now they were watching him beg his wife for mercy, while the woman he brought instead stood frozen by the bar, realizing she wasn't the story anymore. She was just the punchline. Allison's hand moved to the envelope she'd been holding all night. She didn't open it, didn't explain it, just lifted it slightly, enough that Garrett's eyes tracked the movement, enough that his face went pale. "What is that?" he whispered. Allison smiled. Small, controlled, devastating. The truth. And then security started moving, not toward Allison, toward him. Security wasn't moving toward Allison, they were moving toward the stage, toward Monica, toward the moment everything Garrett built started to crack. Monica stepped to the microphone, her face calm but her eyes sharp. She didn't look at Garrett. She looked at Allison, and there was something in that look. Respect, recognition, maybe even relief. Before we continue tonight's auction, Monica's voice filled the ballroom, steady and clear. I need to acknowledge someone whose support has quietly sustained this foundation for years. Garrett's stomach dropped. He knew that tone. That was the tone Monica used when she was about to say something that couldn't be unsaid. Our anonymous matching donor, the one who's covered pediatric care gaps, literacy programs, and emergency medical access for underserved communities, has chosen to step forward tonight. Monica paused, letting the room settle into anticipation. Allison Hale. The ballroom went silent. Then the whispers started. Then the phones came out. Garrett's face went white. Brielle's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Donors turned to each other, processing what Monica just said. Allison wasn't just the quiet wife. She was the money. Allison didn't move to the microphone. She didn't need to. She just stood there, calm and present, while Monica kept talking. Distribution. Mrs. Hale's family trust has pledged over $2 million to this foundation over the past 4 years. She's been reviewing program outcomes, attending budget meetings, and ensuring every dollar goes where it's supposed to. And recently, she's raised concerns about financial oversight that we're taking very seriously. That last sentence landed like a bomb. An investor near the bar pulled out his phone and stepped outside. A board member whispered something to his wife, and they both looked at Garrett with the kind of expression you give someone whose house just caught fire. Monica continued, her voice never wavering. Effective immediately, the foundation will be conducting an independent ethics review of all donor partnerships and ambassador roles. We're committed to transparency. Translation. Garrett's ambassador role was done. His name was under investigation. His reputation was about to be dragged through every headline and donor meeting from here to New York. A journalist near the back caught the whole thing on video. She was already typing, already drafting the post that would go live before dessert was served. Wife exposes husband's lies at charity gala. Anonymous donor revealed. Garrett moved toward Allison without thinking. His hand reached for her wrist, grabbing it softly, desperately, like he was drowning and she was the only thing that could save him. "Allison, please." His voice cracked, low enough that only she could hear. "Not like this." She looked down at his hand on her wrist. Then she looked up at his face. The face she used to love, used to trust, used to believe when he said he was working late or traveling for business or too tired to talk. And she slipped free. Smooth, calm, like his touch didn't mean anything anymore. Like he was a stranger asking for directions. Not her husband begging for mercy. That hurt him more than anything she could have yelled. The room watched. Every donor. Every board member. Every person who thought they knew what this marriage looked like. And now they were watching it end in real time, with no raised voices, no tears, just a quiet, devastating rejection. Brielle stood frozen by the bar, her face red, her hands shaking. She realized too late that she wasn't part of this story. She was just the reason it all fell apart. Then Monica's assistant stepped forward, phone in hand, whispering something urgent. Monica nodded, her face tightening. Security moved again, this time toward Garrett. "Mr. Hale, we need you to step away from the event space. Now." They escorted Garrett through the side exit, away from cameras, away from donors, away from the life he spent years building. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text after text, call after call. Notifications lighting up the screen faster than he could read them. Board members, investors, his PR team, his lawyer. All of them saying the same thing in different words. "We need to talk. This is bad. Call me now." Garrett stood in the hotel parking garage, tie loose, face pale, scrolling through messages that felt like watching his career catch fire in slow motion. Inside the ballroom, the gala continued without him. Donors went back to their wine. The auction resumed. Monica handled it all with the calm efficiency of someone who'd been planning for this moment longer than anyone realized. Brielle stormed out 10 minutes later, furious and humiliated. She'd come to this gala thinking she was going to be introduced as Garrett's new reality. Instead, she became a footnote, a punchline, the other woman who didn't matter enough to be remembered. She got in her car, slammed the door, and drove home too fast, her hands shaking on the wheel. She wasn't thinking about Garrett. She was thinking about how she'd been used. How she'd believed his lies about leaving his wife. How she'd let him make her the villain in a story that was never really about her. Brielle's apartment was dark when she got home. She poured a drink. Then another. She scrolled through the posts already going viral. Clips of Allison standing calm while Garrett fell apart. Headlines calling Allison a quiet power move and Garrett a liar. She threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall and cracked. Then she walked to her balcony. Still in her gown, still wearing the heels that were supposed to make her feel powerful. The city glowed below her, indifferent and cold. What happened next was fast. A stumble, a wrong step, a railing that didn't hold the way it should have. And Brielle Sutton, the woman who wanted to be someone's upgrade, fell. No screaming, no spectacle, just gravity and bad luck and a life that ended before anyone even realized she was gone. Gala coverage. The call came 2 hours later. Police. An accident. A body. A name that made Garrett's blood go cold. And just like that, the scandal got darker. The headlines got worse. The questions got harder to answer. Because now it wasn't just about an affair. It wasn't just about lies at a gala. It was about a woman who died the same night she was publicly humiliated, and people were going to ask why. Allison didn't know yet. She was home, alone, standing in her bedroom with the lights off and the red dress unzipped halfway down her back. She kicked off her heels slowly, one at a time, feeling the relief in her feet, the exhaustion in her bones. But underneath the tiredness was something else. Something electric. Something that felt like freedom. She'd done it. She'd walked into that ballroom and told the truth, and the world didn't end. Garrett's world did. But hers didn't. Gala coverage. Allison sat on the edge of the bed, still in the dress, and stared at her phone. Messages kept coming in. People she hadn't heard from in years. People who suddenly wanted to be her friend now that she wasn't Garrett's accessory anymore. She didn't respond to any of them. She just sat there in the dark, breathing slowly, feeling her heartbeat return to normal. Then the phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but she did. Mrs. Hale. A man's voice. Calm. Official. This is Detective Mills with Chicago PD. We need to ask you some questions. Allison's stomach dropped. About what? About Brielle Sutton. She's dead. Allison woke up famous, and Garrett woke up finished. The Gala clip was everywhere. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. News sites that usually didn't cover charity events were running headlines like "Wife confronts cheating husband at Gala." "You won't believe what happens next," an anonymous donor revealed. The quiet wife who owned him publicly. Allison's phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. Texts from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Interview requests. Messages from women saying, "I wish I had your strength," and "You're an inspiration," and "This is what standing up for yourself looks like." She didn't feel strong. She felt tired. And now, with Brielle dead and detectives asking questions, she felt something else. Something heavier. Monica Fairchild issued a clean, professional statement by 9 a.m. The Chicago Mercy Foundation is committed to transparency and accountability. We thank Allison Hale for her continued support and leadership. All donor partnerships are currently under review. Translation. Garrett was out. Allison was in. And the foundation was covering itself before the headlines got worse. Garrett's family man image was cracking in real time. Posts from 2 years ago, him and Allison at fundraisers, smiling for the camera, looking like the perfect couple, were being reposted with captions like "This man lied to his wife about a gala so he could bring his mistress, and the audacity of cheaters never fails to amaze me." His social media mentions were brutal. People dug up old posts where he talked about marriage and loyalty and family values. Every word aged like milk left out in the sun. Allison sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched, scrolling through messages from people who never greeted her before. People who looked past her at donor events. People who acted like she didn't exist until she became someone they couldn't ignore. She put the phone down and walked to the sink. She washed her hands slowly, the water running over her fingers longer than necessary. She remembered how Garrett used to kiss her hands in the early years. How he'd hold them when they walked. How his touch used to feel like home. She made herself go cold again. Made herself remember that the man who kissed her hands was the same man who lied to her face and brought another woman to an event he said was canceled. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. This one from an unknown number. Just one sentence. "You should have checked what Brielle kept." Allison stared at the message, her pulse kicking up. She didn't recognize the number. Didn't know who sent it. But the words felt like a warning. Like someone knew something she didn't. She screenshot the message and forwarded it to Caroline, her attorney, with no explanation. Just the image and a question mark. Caroline called back within 5 minutes. "Where did this come from?" "I don't know. Unknown number." "Should I be worried?" "Possibly. The police are investigating Brielle's death. If she kept records, texts, emails, recordings, they're going to surface. And if your name is in any of them, we need to be ready." Allison's stomach twisted. "I never contacted her. I never even met her before last night." "Doesn't matter. If Garrett told her things about you, if she saved conversations, if there's anything that ties you to her, it's going to come up. And people are going to twist it." Distribution. Allison closed her eyes, feeling the weight of it settle over her like a cold blanket. She thought the hardest part was over. She thought exposing Garrett at the gala was the end. But it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Before Garrett could buy an apology, Allison filed paperwork that money can't erase. Gala coverage +1. Caroline moved fast. By 10 a.m., the separation agreement was drafted. By noon, it was filed. By 2 p.m., Garrett's lawyer was calling, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Distribution. The infidelity clause was cited on page 3, clear and brutal. Illinois law didn't play around with prenuptial agreements that included breach of fidelity terms. And Garrett had signed one 7 years ago, confident he'd never need to worry about it. He was wrong. Caroline sat across from Allison in her office, pointing at a line on the document with a pen. Her voice was low, steady, the kind of calm that made you feel like everything was under control even when it wasn't. This clause means he forfeits claim to joint assets acquired during the marriage if infidelity is proven. We have hotel receipts, credit card statements, text records, witnesses from the gala. We have enough. Allison's breath caught. Not because it was romantic. Not because Caroline's hand briefly covered hers in a gesture of reassurance. But because someone was finally standing with her instead of over her. Someone was finally treating her like she deserved protection instead of patience. What happens now? Allison asked, her voice quieter than she intended. He'll try to settle. He'll offer money, apologies, promises. But the filing is public record now. The damage is done. His team is going to scramble to control the narrative. But they can't undo this. Caroline leaned back, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. You need to be ready for him to play victim. He's going to say you blindsided him, that you're being cruel, that this could have been handled privately. Allison's jaw tightened. He had months to handle this privately. He chose to lie instead. I know, and we're going to make sure everyone else knows that too. Caroline stood, gathering papers, her movements efficient and controlled. Temporary boundaries are in place. He can't access joint accounts without notification. He can't contact you directly without going through me. And if he tries, we document everything. Distribution. Allison nodded, feeling the reality settle into her bones. This was real. The marriage was over. Not in the emotional, someday we'll figure it out way. In the legal, paperwork filed, no going back way. She left Caroline's office with a folder full of documents and a strange sense of lightness. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for so long she forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. Garrett received the filing mid-morning while sitting in his lawyer's office, trying to figure out how to spin the Gala disaster into something salvageable. His assistant handed him the envelope. He opened it, scanned the first page, and went completely still. She planned this, he whispered, his voice hollow. His lawyer leaned forward, reading over his shoulder, and his face went pale. This is bad, Garrett. The infidelity clause. If they prove it. They already proved it, Garrett snapped. Half of Chicago watched me walk into that gala with Brielle. It's on video. It's everywhere. Bibisco. His phone buzzed. His assistant's voice came through, shaky and apologetic. The board is calling. They want to meet. Today. Contessimal. Garrett closed his eyes, feeling the walls close in. His marriage was over. His reputation was trashed. His ambassador role was gone. And now the board, the people who used to take his calls and laugh at his jokes and trust him with their money, wanted answers he didn't have. He thought about calling Allison. Thought about showing up at the house and begging her to stop this. To give him one more chance. To remember who they used to be. But he didn't. Because deep down he knew it was too late. She wasn't the woman he left at home anymore. She was the woman who walked into that ballroom and chose herself. The mistress didn't leave the story. She died inside it. The news broke at 4 p.m., and within an hour, Brielle Sutton's name was trending. Not because people cared about her, because her death made the scandal messier. Darker, harder to ignore. Woman dies hours after viral gala confrontation. Garrett Hale's mistress found dead, police investigating. Was Brielle Sutton's death an accident or something worse? The headlines didn't care about facts. They cared about clicks. And the story of a mistress dying the same night she was publicly humiliated was too good not to run. Public sympathy turned messy. Some people felt bad for Brielle. Some said she got what she deserved. Others blamed Garrett for putting her in that position. And a loud, vicious corner of the internet started blaming Allison. Like she orchestrated the whole thing. Allison Hale planned that gala entrance. She knew exactly what she was doing. The wife is always the one who gets away with it. I'm not saying she killed her, but the timing is suspicious. Allison's name was being dragged through gossip threads and comment sections by people who didn't know her, didn't care about the truth, just wanted someone to blame for a tragedy that had nothing to do with them. Reporters circled. Her phone rang nonstop. A news van parked outside her house by 6 p.m. She closed the blinds and sat in the dark, trying to process how fast everything spiraled. Garrett was worse off. The police requested his phone to clear timelines, which was polite language for, "You're a suspect until we say you're not." His lawyer went quiet when the request came through. Not the good kind of quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when your attorney realizes the case just got 10 times harder. Contesimal. Garrett sat in his Lake Forest house, alone, replaying the last 24 hours in his head like a bad movie. He couldn't turn off .gl coverage. He kept seeing Brielle's hands on his tie. The way she smiled when she fixed it. The way she looked at him like he was hers. And then he saw Allison's face at the gala. Calm, controlled, unshaken, like she'd already mourned him and moved on. Guilt and desire collided in his chest, and he hated how tangled they were. He felt guilty for dragging Brielle into this. Guilty for lying to Allison. Guilty for thinking he could have both and lose neither. But he also felt something else. Something he didn't want to admit. He missed Allison. Not the version of her that stayed quiet and made coffee and smiled at donor events. He missed the version he saw at the gala, the one who walked in like she owned the room. The one who made powerful people lean in. The one who didn't need him anymore. That version scared him, because it reminded him of who she was before he convinced her to be smaller. His phone buzzed. Another call from his lawyer. Another message from the board. Another headline with his name and the words "under investigation" in the same sentence. Garrett didn't answer. He just sat there in the house that used to feel like success and now felt like a prison. Outside, a detective's car pulled into the driveway. 2 officers got out, moving slow and deliberate. One of them knocked on the door. Steady. Official. The kind of knock that means your day is about to get worse. Distribution. Garrett opened the door, and the detective said the words he'd been dreading since the news broke. "We need your phone, Mr. Hale, and we need you to come downtown to answer a few questions." Allison thought the worst part was humiliation, until questions showed up at her door. 2 detectives. 1 male, 1 female. Both with badges and calm faces that gave nothing away. They stood on her porch at 9 a.m., polite but firm, asking if they could come inside. Allison let them in because saying no would have looked worse. They sat in her living room, the same living room where she and Garrett used to watch movies on Sunday nights, where they opened Christmas presents, where they built a life that turned out to be half real and half performance. The male detective, Detective Mills, pulled out a notepad. The female detective, Detective Warren, pulled out a recorder and set it on the coffee table. "Mrs. Hale, we're investigating the death of Brielle Sutton. We understand you were at the same event she attended the night she died." Mills's voice was calm, neutral, the kind of tone designed to make you feel like this was routine. "I was at the gala, yes." Allison kept her hands folded in her lap, her voice steady. "Did you have any contact with Miss Sutton that night?" Warren asked, watching Allison's face carefully. She said something cruel near a microphone. I responded. That was it. The pen scratched against the notepad, dry and deliberate. The sound filled the room, louder than it should have been, making every second feel heavier. What did she say? Mills leaned forward slightly, his posture open but focused. Allison's jaw tightened. She didn't want to repeat it, didn't want to give those words life again. But lying would have been worse. She made comments about my marriage, about me, personal things my husband told her in private. Warren's eyes softened, but her pen kept moving. And how did that make you feel? Allison felt exposed, like she was back in that moment at the gala, standing in front of 500 people while her private pain became public entertainment. But she refused to shrink, refused to let them see her as weak or guilty or broken. Angry, humiliated. But I didn't touch her. I didn't threaten her. I said one sentence and walked away. Kasich. Mills nodded, flipping a page. Did you know Miss Sutton before that night? No. Did your husband ever mention her to you? No. Did you know he was having an affair? Allison paused. Not because she didn't know the answer, because the question felt like a trap. I suspected. Warren leaned in, her voice gentle but persistent. When did you start suspecting? A few weeks ago. Maybe longer. I don't know exactly when I knew for sure. The questions kept coming. What time did you arrive at the gala? What time did you leave? Did you see Miss Sutton leave? Did you follow her? Did you contact her after the event? Allison answered each one cleanly, offering nothing extra, nothing that could be twisted later. She'd learned from Caroline. Answer what they ask, not what they imply. Mills set his pen down and looked at Allison directly. Mrs. Hale, did your husband ever mention a private agreement with Miss Sutton? Financial support? Promises about leaving you? Anything like that? Allison's stomach dropped. She didn't know. She'd suspected Garrett was giving Brielle money, hotels, dinners, gifts, but an agreement? Something formal? That was new. Adam learning. Not to me, she said carefully. Warren glanced at Mills, and something passed between them. A look that said they knew more than they were sharing. If you think of anything else, call us. Mills handed her a card. Simple, white, official. They stood, thanked her for her time, walked to the door like they just stopped by for coffee. But as they reached the porch, Mills turned back. One more thing. Brielle kept records. Emails, texts, recordings. We're going through them now. If there's anything you want to tell us before we find it, now's the time. Allison met his eyes. Calm, steady, unflinching. There's nothing to find. Garrett's mansion stayed bright, but he couldn't stop feeling like the lights were mocking him. Every room looked staged. Perfect furniture, expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows that showed off the kind of view people paid millions for. But it all felt hollow, like a museum exhibit titled What Success Looks Like Before It Falls Apart. He paced from the kitchen to the living room to the office and back, checking his phone every 30 seconds like the answers would suddenly appear. They didn't. His banking app showed frozen accounts. Not all of them, but enough to make him nervous. His social media mentions were a nightmare he'd stopped reading hours ago. His email inbox was full of messages from people who suddenly needed to reschedule, or revisit terms, or take a step back for optics. Rich people didn't say no directly. They just stopped saying yes. Garrett tried calling allies, investors he'd known for years, board members who used to laugh at his jokes, friends who'd stood beside him at 100 events just like the gala. Most didn't answer. The ones who did were polite but distant, using corporate language that translated to "you're on your own." He refreshed Twitter, refreshed Instagram, refreshed the news sites that were still running headlines with his name attached. Each refresh felt like picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. By midnight, he was exhausted but couldn't sleep. He walked upstairs to the bedroom, the one he used to share with Allison before she stopped coming home most nights. Adam learning. The bed was too big, too empty. He lay down on his side, out of habit, and his hand reached across the mattress to where Allison used to sleep. Cold sheets. Nothing. Just space where a person used to be. The emptiness hit like a bruise, dull and aching and impossible to ignore. He thought about the early years, the way Allison used to curl into him at night, her head on his chest, her breathing slow and steady, the way she'd wake up before him and make coffee, and he'd find her in the kitchen reading with her legs tucked under her, looking soft and safe in his. When did he stop seeing her that way? When did she become background noise instead of the person he chose? He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It was gradual, a slow fade, like turning down the volume on a song until you forget it's playing. Garrett rolled onto his back and stared at the ceiling. His chest felt tight, not from fear, from regret. He grabbed his phone and almost texted her. Almost typed, "I'm sorry," or "Can we talk?" or "I miss you." But what would that do? She'd already filed separation papers, already exposed him publicly, already chosen herself over him. She was done, and he didn't know how to undo that. He set the phone down and got up, restless and wired. He walked to his office and opened his desk drawer looking for aspirin. Now novel. Instead, he found a document he didn't recognize. A trust agreement. Legal letterhead. Dated 3 years ago. Allison's signature at the bottom, clear and official. Garrett pulled it out slowly, his hands shaking. He scanned the first page. Then the second. Then the third. It was a family trust. Set up by Allison's late grandmother. Managed by Allison. And it controlled voting shares in several ventures Garrett thought were his. He'd built his career thinking he was in control. Thinking the board respected him because he was smart and connected and capable. Spines. But Allison had been holding leverage the entire time. Quiet. Invisible. Waiting. Garrett sank into his desk chair, the document still in his hands, and whispered the only truth that mattered. She planned this. Garrett built the table, but the table voted without him. The emergency board meeting was called for 10 a.m. at the foundation's downtown office. Garrett showed up early, coffee in hand, tie perfect, trying to look like a man who still had control. He didn't. The conference room was full when he walked in. Investors, board members, Monica Fairchild at the head of the table with her hands folded and her expression unreadable. Dr. Harold Keane sat 2 seats down, watching Garrett with the kind of calm that felt dangerous. No one greeted him. No one smiled. They just looked at him like he was a problem they needed to solve quickly and quietly. Monica started without small talk. We're here to discuss the foundation's public image and leadership structure moving forward. Given recent events, the board feels it's necessary to reevaluate certain partnerships. Translation: Garrett was being cut. An investor near the end of the table spoke up. The Gala incident has created significant reputational risk. Donors are asking questions. The press is circling. We need distance. Another board member nodded. We've received calls requesting an independent ethics review of all ambassador roles and donor relationships. We can't ignore that. Garrett opened his mouth to defend himself, but Dr. Keane cut him off with a single raised hand. Garrett, this isn't personal. It's practical. The foundation can't afford to be associated with scandal. You understand that. Keane's voice was calm, almost fatherly, but his eyes were cold. I understand that you're throwing me out without giving me a chance to explain, Garrett said, his voice tight. Monica leaned forward. There's nothing to explain. The video is public. The separation filing is public. Brielle Sutton's death is public. And now the police are involved. We're not making a judgment about your personal life, Garrett. We're protecting the foundation. A door at the back of the room opened, and Allison walked in. Garrett's breath caught. She wasn't supposed to be here. She'd never attended board meetings. She was just the wife who smiled in photos and wrote checks quietly. But she walked in like she belonged, like she'd been planning this moment for months. Monica stood and gestured to an empty seat near the front. Mrs. Hale, thank you for joining us. Allison sat down, calm and controlled, with Dr. Keane and Monica flanking her like bookends. She didn't look at Garrett, didn't acknowledge him at all, and that hurt more than anything she could have said. Garrett couldn't stop staring. She looked different, stronger. Her spine was straight, her eyes were clear, and there was a confidence in the way she held herself that he didn't recognize. Like she wasn't his wife anymore, like she'd already moved on. Dr. Keane turned to Allison, his voice quiet but clear enough for the room to hear. Mrs. Hale, your family trust has been a cornerstone of this foundation's funding. We're grateful for your continued support. And we wanted to ask, do you want to own what you already understand? It wasn't a question about money. It was an offer, a seat at the table, a role Garrett used to fill. Allison looked at Keane, then at Monica, then finally at Garrett. Her expression didn't change. No anger, no pity, just a calm, quiet certainty. Yes, she said simply. The room shifted. Board members exchanged glances. An investor nodded approvingly. Monica smiled, small, professional, but genuine. Garrett felt the ground drop out from under him. He'd lost the foundation, lost the board, lost the reputation he spent years building. And his wife, his quiet, overlooked, underestimated wife was taking it all. Brielle didn't just want Garrett. She wanted insurance. The police found it 3 days after her death, tucked inside a locked drawer in her apartment. A small external hard drive, neat, organized, labeled with dates. Detective Mills plugged it into his laptop and started clicking through folders. What he found made him call his partner immediately. Recordings. Dozens of them. Brielle's voice? Clear and deliberate, narrating her relationship with Garrett like she was building a case. March 15th. Garrett told me today that he's planning to leave Allison by summer. He said the prenup has a clause, but his lawyer thinks they can get around it. He promised me a condo downtown once the divorce is final. Now novel. April 22nd. Garrett gave me access to his calendar. He's been lying to his wife about business trips. Half of them are just us meeting in different cities. He thinks she doesn't check. May 10th. I asked Garrett about the development project he's been working on. He mentioned Dr. Keane signed off on it, but he wouldn't give me details. I think he's hiding how much Keane controls. The recordings went on. Dates, details, conversations Garrett never knew were being saved. But it wasn't just audio. There were screenshots, text messages between Garrett and Brielle that were intimate and cruel. Emails about hotel bookings, dinner reservations, gifts. Financial transfers Garrett made from accounts that were supposed to be for business expenses. Mills leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. She was building a case, either for blackmail or protection. Maybe both. Warren scrolled through the files, her face tight. Some of these emails referenced deals Garrett never disclosed. Donor funds that got moved around. Projects that Dr. Keane approved without full board knowledge. This isn't just about an affair, Mills said. This is financial misconduct. Maybe fraud. They flagged the files and sent copies to the foundation's legal team, the district attorney's office, and Garrett's attorney. And they sent a notification to Allison's lawyer. Caroline called Allison within the hour. You need to see this. They met at Caroline's office. Caroline pulled up the files on her laptop and let Allison scroll through them in silence. Allison read one message from Brielle to Garrett, dated 2 months ago. You said she's boring in bed. You said she doesn't understand you. So why are you still going home to her every night? You're using me, Garrett. And if you don't fix this soon, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Allison's stomach turned. Not because the words hurt, because they confirmed what she already knew. Garrett had been lying to both of them. She kept reading. Another message. This one from Garrett. I'll handle it. Allison doesn't ask questions. She's too focused on her volunteer work to notice what I'm doing. Give me until after the gala, and I'll make my move. Allison's hands shook. Her breathing went shallow. She wanted to stop reading, but she couldn't. She chose truth over comfort, even when the truth felt like a knife. Then she saw a file name that made her freeze. GT Development, Keane Approval. She clicked it. The document opened. It was a project proposal for a real estate development in a low-income neighborhood on the south side. Donor funds were being redirected. Dr. Keane's signature was at the bottom, and Garrett's name was listed as project lead. This wasn't just an affair. This was fraud. Donor money being used for private profit. Allison looked up at Caroline, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't just cheat on me. He stole from the foundation. Caroline nodded. And Brielle knew. That's why she kept everything. Allison leaned back in her chair, processing. The files referenced a project name she recognized. GT Development. The same locked folder she'd seen on Garrett's laptop weeks ago. She finally understood why it was locked. Garrett lost control of the one thing that always saved him, his story. The police took his phone on a Tuesday morning, polite but firm, saying it was part of their timeline investigation into Brielle's death. His legal team panicked immediately. They're going to see everything, his lawyer said, pacing his office with his hands in his hair. Texts, emails, calendar entries, bank app transactions. If there's anything on that phone that contradicts your statement, they'll find it. Garrett sat in a chair, staring at the wall, feeling the walls close in. His phone had everything. Conversations with Brielle, messages to investors, calendar entries that proved he'd lied about business trips, bank transfers that didn't match the story he'd been telling. Adam learning. He couldn't access his key accounts without his phone, couldn't check messages, couldn't control the narrative anymore. And worse, Brielle's timeline could trap him. The police were building a sequence of events. Who called who was where, who had motive. And if Garrett's phone showed he contacted Brielle after the gala, or tracked her location, or said anything that sounded like a threat, he was done. His lawyer stopped pacing and looked at him directly. Did you contact her after the gala? Yes or no? Garrett closed his eyes. I called her once. She didn't answer. I left a message telling her to go home and stay quiet. Forensic interview solutions. What time? I don't know. Maybe 11. Maybe midnight. His lawyer's face went pale. Garrett, she died around 1 a.m. If your call is the last communication on her phone, you're the last person who tried to reach her. That makes you a person of interest. Garrett's stomach dropped. He hadn't thought about it like that. He just wanted her to stop posting. Stop talking. Stop making the scandal worse. He didn't want her dead. But explaining that to the police, to a jury, was a different story. He needed to talk to Allison. Needed to explain. Needed her to know that whatever mistakes he made, he didn't hurt Brielle. He borrowed his assistant's phone and called Allison's number from memory. It rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was calm, distant, like she was answering a call from a stranger. Forensic interview solutions. Allison, it's me. Silence. I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need you to hear this. The police took my phone. They think I had something to do with Brielle's death. I didn't. I swear to you I didn't. Adam learning. More silence. Then, finally, her voice came through, cold and clear. Why are you calling me, Garrett? Because you know me. You know I'm not capable of that. I made mistakes, but I didn't hurt her. The sound of his voice still pulled at something in Allison's body. Even after everything. Even after the lies and the gala and the separation papers. Some part of her still responded to his tone, to the desperation in his words. And she hated that it did. Spines. Garrett, she said slowly, her voice steady. You don't need me. You need a witness. You need someone to vouch for you in front of the police and the press and the board. But I'm not that person anymore. Allison, please. Forensic interview solutions. She ended the call. Garrett stared at the phone in his hand, the silence louder than anything she could have said. He wanted to call back, wanted to beg, wanted to convince her that he was still the man she married. But he wasn't, and they both knew it. Now novel. His lawyer's assistant knocked on the door. The DA's office just called. They want to schedule a formal interview. Tomorrow. Garrett closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd have to answer for everything. There's a special kind of pain in packing a life that still smells like love. Allison stood in the bedroom she used to share with Garrett, surrounded by boxes and the ghost of who they used to be. The house felt different now, quieter, like it knew the marriage was over before either of them said it out loud. She started with essentials, clothes, documents, photos she couldn't bring herself to throw away yet. Each item went into a box with careful precision, like she was dismantling evidence at a crime scene. The staff noticed. The housekeeper who used to check with Garrett about everything suddenly started asking Allison where things should go. The security team updated access codes and gave Allison the new ones without being asked. They knew who was really in charge now. Allison opened the closet and pulled out a shirt. Navy blue, soft cotton. The one Garrett wore on their honeymoon. She held it for a second too long, and the memory hit fast and hard. His hands on her waist. The way he pulled her close on the beach and whispered that he'd never felt this lucky. The way he kissed her like she was the only person in the world. She pressed her palm to her chest and waited for the ache to pass. It did. Slower than she wanted, but it passed. She folded the shirt carefully and placed it in a donation box. Not because she was cruel. Because holding on to it wouldn't bring back the man who wore it. That version of Garrett didn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. Her phone buzzed. Caroline. Moving day is set for Friday. Security will be there. You won't have to see him. Allison typed back a quick thank you and kept packing. She moved through the house room by room, collecting pieces of herself she'd left scattered over 7 years of marriage. Books, jewelry, the coffee mug her grandmother gave her. Small things that mattered more than furniture. In the kitchen, she found the calendar they used to share. Garrett's handwriting filled most of the squares, meetings, trips, events. Her handwriting was smaller, tucked in corners. Dentist, grocery run, anniversary dinner? With a question mark, because she wasn't sure if he'd remember. He hadn't. Allison ripped the calendar off the wall and threw it in the trash. She walked upstairs to finish packing her bedroom. The bed was made, crisp white sheets, pillows arranged perfectly. It looked like a hotel room, sterile, impersonal, like no one had ever loved anyone there. She zipped the last suitcase and set it by the door. Then she noticed something. A slim envelope tucked inside the front pocket of the bag. She pulled it out slowly. She didn't pack this. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. Not Garrett's. Not Caroline's. Someone else. Allison's pulse kicked up. She turned the envelope over, looking for clues. No return address. No postmark. Just her name in neat block letters. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph, taken at the gala. Not during her confrontation with Garrett. Before that, when she first walked in. The angle was odd, like someone was standing far back watching from a distance. And in the background, partially hidden behind a column, was Dr. Harold Keane. His eyes were on Allison. Not on Garrett. Not on the crowd. On her. Like he'd been waiting for her to arrive. Allison stared at the photo, her hands shaking slightly. Someone wanted her to know she'd been watched. Someone wanted her to understand that the gala wasn't just about exposing Garrett. It was about testing her. And she had no idea who was behind it. Allison didn't crash the gala to beg. She crashed it to collect. Caroline laid out the documents on her desk like she was presenting evidence in court. Bank statements, trust agreements, board resolutions, proxy voting records. Your grandmother was smarter than anyone gave her credit for, Caroline said, tapping one document with her pen. She set up this trust 20 years ago, naming you as the primary beneficiary when you turned 25. But the real power is in the voting shares. Allison leaned forward, scanning the paperwork. She'd known about the trust. It was how she'd been funding the foundation anonymously for years. But she hadn't looked closely at the fine print. What voting shares? She asked. Caroline flipped to a page near the back. Your trust holds a 15% stake in 3 ventures Garrett lists as personal investments, real estate, development projects, even a stake in the foundation's endowment fund. He never controlled them. You did. He just didn't know it. Allison felt the air leave her lungs. She'd been sitting on leverage the entire marriage and never realized it. While Garrett built his reputation on deals and partnerships, she'd been the silent gatekeeper, holding keys to doors he thought he'd unlocked himself. How did he not know? Allison whispered. Your grandmother structured it through a proxy, an attorney who voted on your behalf until you were ready to take control. Garrett assumed the proxy was a neutral third party. He had no idea it was protecting your interests the whole time. Allison sat back, processing. Every board meeting, every investment decision, every move Garrett made thinking he was in control. Someone had been watching, waiting, making sure Allison's stake stayed protected. Who was the proxy? Caroline hesitated. That's the interesting part. The proxy retired 2 years ago and transferred authority directly to you. Paperwork was filed, signed, legal. You've been in control since then. You just never exercised it. Until the gala. When Allison stood in that ballroom and revealed she was the anonymous donor, she wasn't just exposing Garrett's lies. She was activating power she'd been holding quietly for years. Can I shift things now? Allison asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Caroline smiled. You already have. The moment you told the foundation you wanted oversight, the board had to listen. Because without your trust support, half their funding disappears. You didn't crash that gala to make a scene, Allison. You crashed it to collect what was always yours. Allison felt something shift in her chest. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. She stood up, gathering the documents. Schedule the meeting. What meeting? Caroline asked Dr. Kelly. The one where I take my seat at the table. Later that night, Garrett cornered her in a private hallway outside the foundation offices. Not physically. He didn't touch her. But he stood close enough that she could feel his breath. Close enough that the space between them felt heavy. Allison. His voice was low, desperate. We need to talk. She didn't move. Didn't step back. Just held his gaze calm and steady. There's nothing to talk about, she said simply. You're taking everything from me. His eyes searched hers, looking for the woman who used to soften when he said her name. The woman who used to let him win arguments just to avoid conflict. But that woman wasn't here anymore. Sturkeneker. I'm taking what's mine, Allison corrected. You just didn't know it belonged to me. Garrett's jaw tightened. He leaned in slightly, not threatening, just close. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face, the fear in his eyes. But Allison held eye contact until he stepped back first. And that told her everything she needed to know. She'd already won. Garrett offered a speech, a check, and a smile. Allison wanted the truth. The meeting was his idea. A quiet restaurant, private room, no press, no lawyers, just the two of them sitting across a table like they used to when things were simpler. Except nothing was simple anymore. Sturkeneker. Garrett showed up in a tailored suit, freshly shaved, looking like the version of himself people trusted. The philanthropist, the husband, the man who fixed problems with charm and money. Allison wore jeans and a sweater. She wasn't dressing to impress him. She was dressing to remind herself she didn't owe him anything. He started with an apology. Rehearsed, polished, the kind of apology that sounds sincere until you realize it doesn't actually admit fault. I made mistakes, Garrett said, his voice low and controlled. I hurt you. I embarrassed you. And I'm sorry. I want to make this right. Allison sipped her water and said nothing. I'm proposing a settlement, he continued, sliding a folder across the table. The house. A fair division of assets. A public apology if that's what you need. And we handle this quietly. No more headlines. No more damage. She opened the folder. Scanned the numbers. It was generous. More than generous. It was the kind of offer designed to make her feel like she was winning. But it wasn't about winning. It was about him controlling the narrative one last time. And what do you get? Allison asked, looking up. Peace. Closure. A chance to rebuild my reputation without this hanging over me. So I take the money and disappear, Allison said flatly. That's not what I'm saying. That's exactly what you're saying. Garrett leaned forward, lowering his voice to the tone he used to use when he wanted something. Soft, intimate, the tone that used to melt her. Allison, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for one thing. One private conversation. As husband and wife. Not as lawyers or enemies. Just us. She felt the pull. Hated that she felt it. Hated that his voice still had power over something inside her. She gripped her glass tighter. Kept her legs still under the table. Refused to let her body betray what her mind already knew. Tell me the real reason you lied about that night, she said. Garrett blinked. What? The gala. You said it was cancelled. You brought Brielle instead. Why? Don't give me the rehearsed answer. Tell me the truth. His face shifted. The charm cracked just slightly. I thought. He stopped. Started again. I thought if you weren't there it would be easier. I could bring Brielle. Introduce her to people. Start building a life that didn't include you. I didn't think you'd show up. Because you thought I was too weak to challenge you, Allison said. No. Because you thought I didn't matter enough to fight for myself. Garrett didn't answer. But his silence said everything. Allison pushed the folder back across the table. I don't want your settlement. I don't want your apology. I want the truth about Dr. Keane. I want to know why the gala felt like a setup. And I want to know who's been watching me. Garrett's face went pale. September Fox. What are you talking about? The gala wasn't cancelled, Garrett. It was a test. And I'm starting to think you weren't the one giving it. Garrett looked down at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. The gala wasn't cancelled. It was my test. And he wouldn't explain who said it. Allison didn't raise her voice. She raised a boundary, and the whole city heard it. The press conference was Caroline's idea. If you don't control the story, someone else will, she'd said. And Allison was done letting other people write her narrative. She stood at a podium outside the foundation offices. Cameras pointed at her like weapons. Reporters shouting questions before she even opened her mouth. Monica stood beside her, a silent show of support. The foundation's logo behind them. The message clear. Allison wasn't just Garrett's wife anymore. She was a donor, a leader, someone who mattered. Allison cleared her throat, and the noise died down. I'm not here to ask for sympathy, she started, her voice calm but firm. I'm here to set a boundary. My marriage is over. The details are private. But what happened at the gala was public, and I owe it to myself and to everyone watching to be clear about one thing. She paused, letting the words settle. Betrayal doesn't just hurt the person it happens to. It damages trust in every relationship around it. Teaches people that loyalty is optional. That vows are negotiable. That promises don't mean anything if no one is watching. A reporter called out, "Do you blame your husband?" Allison met the camera directly. I blame the choices he made. I blame the lies he told. And I refuse to carry shame that belongs to him. Another question. Are you filing for divorce? That's between me and my attorney. What I will say is this. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in dignity. I'm interested in rebuilding my life on terms that don't require me to shrink so someone else can feel big. Monica leaned into her own microphone. The foundation supports Mrs. Hale fully. Her contributions have been essential to our work, and we're grateful for her continued leadership. Translation. Garrett was out. Allison was in. And the foundation had already chosen sides. Rob Kelly. Would you forgive him if he apologized publicly but lied privately? Drop your answer and comment where you're watching from. The press conference ended 10 minutes later. Reporters scattered to file their stories. Monica squeezed Allison's hand and whispered, "You did good." Allison walked toward her car, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on her back. She'd just told the entire city she wasn't backing down. And then she saw him, Garrett, standing by the side entrance, waiting. Their eyes met for 1 second, just one, and Allison saw everything in his face. Regret, desperation, the realization that he'd lost something he'd never get back. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just watched as Allison adjusted her earrings slowly, a small, deliberate gesture that used to be his. He used to love when she did that, used to think it meant she was nervous, used to think he owned that moment. But now, watching her do it with complete control, he realized he never owned anything. He'd just been allowed to borrow pieces of her until she decided to take them back. Allison walked past him without a word, and Garrett stood there, frozen, catching the scent of her perfume as she passed. The same one she wore on their wedding day. The same one that used to mean home. He closed his eyes like it hurt, because it did. That night, Allison opened the second envelope Caroline had given her weeks ago, the one she'd been avoiding, the one that contained information she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Inside was a name she never expected to be tied to Garrett's money, Dr. Harold Keane. Allison didn't need a love confession. She needed a money confession. Caroline spread the financial records across the conference table like she was building a case. Bank transfers, hotel charges, receipts from restaurants Allison had never been to, gifts purchased on cards that were supposed to be for business expenses only. Every trip Garrett said was for work, Caroline said, pointing at highlighted lines. Matches a hotel stay with Brielle. Every client dinner matches a reservation for two. Every business expense matches something personal. Allison scanned the numbers, her stomach tightening. It wasn't the affair that shocked her anymore. It was the scale, the months of planning, the money wasted on a relationship built on lies while their marriage starved. How much total? Allison asked. Caroline flipped to the last page. Conservatively, $80,000 over 8 months. Hotels, dinners, jewelry, trips, all coded as business expenses, all paid from joint accounts and foundation discretionary funds. Allison's jaw tightened. He used foundation money? Some of it. Not enough to trigger an audit, but enough to matter. And here's where it gets worse. Caroline pulled out another document. These transfers link to a development project called GT Development. Garrett listed it as personal investment funded by his own assets. But the money trail says otherwise. Allison leaned closer. The initial funding came from a donor account. Redirected, rebranded, cleaned up to look legitimate. But the approval signature at the bottom isn't Garrett's. Allison's pulse kicked up. She knew what was coming before Caroline said it. Julia Malone author. It's Dr. Keane's. The room went quiet. Allison stared at the signature, neat, official, damning. Keane approved donor funds being used for a private real estate project? Allison asked. Rib Kelly. It looks that way, and Garrett's name is listed as project lead. If this gets out, it's not just an affair. It's fraud. Donor money being used for profit. That's federal. Allison sat back, her hands shaking slightly. She thought Garrett was just a liar, a cheater, a man who chose comfort over commitment. But he was worse than that. He was stealing, and Dr. Keane was helping him. Caroline's hand covered Allison's for one steady second while she read the line item again. Her breath caught, not because it was romantic, because someone was finally standing with her instead of over her. Because Caroline wasn't asking her to be smaller or quieter or easier to manage. She was just there, steady, solid. What do we do with this? Allison asked, her voice quieter than she intended. We file it. We hand it to the foundation's legal team. We let the ethics review do its job. And we make sure Garrett can't spin this into something it's not. Allison nodded, feeling the weight of what came next settle into her bones. She turned to the last page of the report. One payment memo caught her eye, just 2 words in the notes field. Keane approval. It wasn't just one transaction. It was a pattern. Dozens of payments. All approved by Keane. All tied to projects Garrett claimed were independent. Keane wasn't just signing off, Allison said slowly. He was controlling everything. Garrett thought he was building an empire, but Keane was the one holding the keys. September Fox. Caroline leaned back, her expression tight. If Keane signed off on this, it becomes bigger than your marriage, Allison. It becomes a foundation scandal. Maybe a criminal investigation. You ready for that? Allison looked at the documents one more time. At the lies stacked in spreadsheets. At the marriage she thought she had, reduced to line items and receipts. I'm ready, she said, because this wasn't about Garrett anymore. It was about the truth. When rich men panic, they start calling people they used to ignore. Garrett's phone rang at 7 a.m., a lender he'd worked with for 5 years. The conversation lasted 3 minutes, polite and cold, ending with words that made Garrett's stomach drop. We're going to need to revisit the terms on your line of credit. Given recent events, the risk profile has changed. We'll be in touch. By 9 a.m., a development partner left a voicemail. Garrett, we need to pause the Lincoln Park project. Just for optics. You understand. Call me when things settle down. By noon, his assistant knocked on his office door, her face tight with the kind of tension that comes from delivering bad news you know will land badly. Mr. Hale, 3 meetings got canceled this morning. They all said the same thing. They need to reschedule indefinitely. Garrett leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. Didn't. Nobody was saying no directly. Nobody was cutting ties publicly. They were just stepping back, distancing, using polite corporate language that translated to "you're toxic right now, and we can't afford to be near you." He refreshed his email. More of the same. Let's reconnect in a few months. We'll circle back when the timing is better. Appreciate your understanding. Translation. Don't call us. Garrett stood and walked to his office window, looking out over downtown Chicago, the city he used to own, the city that used to take his calls and laugh at his jokes and trust him with their money. Now it was turning its back. Reb Kelly. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to an old video. Allison in their kitchen, laughing at something he'd said. Her hair loose, her smile real, the kind of moment that felt so normal he forgot to appreciate it. He remembered standing behind her that day, wrapping his arms around her waist, kissing her neck while she tried to cook. She leaned into him, soft and warm, and he treated that intimacy like it was guaranteed. Like it would always be there waiting for him, no matter how many lies he told or how many nights he came home late smelling like someone else. He was wrong. Garrett closed the video and set his phone down. His chest felt tight. Not from panic. From regret. The kind that settles in your bones and doesn't leave. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Come alone tonight. 8 p.m. You know where. No signature. But Garrett knew who sent it. Dr. Harold Keane. Julia Malone, author. The man who'd been pulling strings Garrett didn't even know existed. The man whose approval appeared on documents Garrett thought he controlled. The man who'd been watching this whole disaster unfold like it was part of a plan. Garrett stared at the message for a long time. He could ignore it, could refuse to show up, could tell Keane to handle his own mess. But he didn't have that kind of power anymore. Because Keane wasn't just a board member or a donor or a business partner. Keane was the gatekeeper. And Garrett had just realized he'd been living in a house Keane built, using keys Keane provided, thinking he owned something that was never really his. Garrett typed one word. Where? The response came immediately. The same place we made the first deal. Don't be late. Garrett's hands shook slightly as he put the phone down. He knew exactly where Keane meant. The private club on the north side. The place where Garrett signed agreements he didn't fully read. The place where his career took off and his integrity started dying. He was about to find out how much it would cost to get it back. Sia Studios. If he even could. Garrett donated to faith, but he never learned humility. The church event was his PR team's idea. You need to be seen doing something good. Something that doesn't involve money or power. Something that looks like repentance. So Garrett showed up at a community church on the south side, cameras in tow, wearing a sweater instead of a suit, trying to look humble. It didn't work. He stood beside the pastor, smiling for photos, shaking hands with volunteers, talking about giving back and rebuilding trust, in a voice that sounded rehearsed because it was. The pastor was kind. The volunteers were polite. But Garrett could see it in their eyes. They knew why he was there. This wasn't about faith. It was about branding. A reporter asked, Mr. Hale, do you think one event can repair your reputation? Garrett's smile didn't falter. I'm not here to repair anything. I'm here to serve. The reporter didn't look convinced. Neither did the volunteers. The clip was online within an hour. Garrett Hale attempts comeback at church event. The comments were brutal. This man thinks showing up with cameras is repentance? Where was this energy when he was lying to his wife? September Fox. PR stunt. Nothing more. Allison's phone buzzed with the video link. 3 different people sent it to her within minutes, all with the same message. Did you see this? She watched it once. Muted. Just to see his face. He looked tired. Older. Like the weight of everything was finally catching up. But he was still performing. Still trying to control how people saw him. Allison turned off her phone and walked to her closet. Fiveable. She pulled out the red gala dress. The one she wore the night everything changed. She tried it on slowly, zipping it up, adjusting the fabric, looking at herself in the mirror. Not because she was going anywhere, because she needed to remember who she was when she wore it. Strong, certain, unafraid. Her reflection stared back at her. Not the quiet wife who used to shrink in photos. Not the woman who apologized for taking up space. But someone new. Someone who belonged to herself. For the first time, Allison looked at her own reflection and felt wanted. Not by Garrett. Not by anyone else. By herself. She smiled. Small. Private. Powerful. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from a woman in her Bible study group. Someone at the church said something during Garrett's visit. Thought you should know. Attached was a short audio clip. Allison pressed play. A woman's voice? Older, steady. Speaking near a microphone that wasn't meant to catch her words but did anyway. That man thinks his wife is simple. But she's not. She's the one who kept the lights on while he was busy turning them off. Then quieter almost to herself. His wife isn't who you think. Allison played it again. Then again. Not because she needed to hear it. Because someone finally said out loud what she'd been proving quietly for months. She wasn't simple. She wasn't forgettable. She wasn't the background. She was the power he never saw coming. Allison unzipped the dress carefully, hung it back in the closet, and put on jeans and a t-shirt. She didn't need armor today. She just needed to keep moving forward. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Monica Fairchild. Can we meet tomorrow? I have something you need to see. Allison typed back quickly. Kelly. What is it? Monica's response came fast. Proof that you were never the one being tested. The same room that overlooked Allison last year was suddenly trying to recruit her. Monica Fairchild's office was different this time. Warmer. Monica offered coffee, pulled out a chair, spoke to Allison like an equal instead of an accessory. I'll get straight to it, Monica said, sitting across from Allison with a folder between them. We want you to lead the new Health Access Initiative. Full authority. Your vision. Your terms. Allison blinked, processing. A month ago, she was the quiet wife who folded mailers and smiled in photos. Now she was being offered leadership of a program that would shape healthcare access for thousands of people. Why me? Allison asked. Monica leaned forward, her voice steady and sure. Because you've been doing the work for years without needing credit. Because donors trust you. Because you understand what it means to be overlooked, and that makes you the right person to fight for people who are. Allison felt something shift in her chest. Not pride. Recognition. Someone finally saw her. What about Garrett? Allison asked carefully. Garrett's role is over. The board voted. It's done. Monica paused. This isn't about him anymore, Allison. It's about you. Do you want it? Allison sat back, feeling the weight of the question. Saying yes meant stepping into the spotlight, meant owning her power publicly, meant never being able to hide in the background again. But she was done hiding. Yes, Allison said. On my terms. Monica smiled, wide, genuine, relieved. She stood and pulled Allison into a hug that lasted a second too long. Allison felt the warmth, the admiration, maybe even a little envy mixed in. When Monica pulled back, her hands lingered on Allison's shoulders. You have no idea how powerful you are. Allison smiled. I'm starting to. They spent the next hour going over details. Budget. Timeline. Staffing. Allison asked questions Monica didn't expect. Sharp, specific, the kind that showed she'd been paying attention all along. By the time they finished, Monica looked at Allison differently. Not like a donor's wife. Like a leader. As Allison stood to leave, Monica slid one more file across the table. One last thing, Monica said, her voice dropping. This came across my desk yesterday. I debated showing you, but you deserve to know. Allison opened the file. Sturkeneker. Inside were emails. Correspondence between Dr. Harold Keane and someone Allison didn't recognize. The subject line read, Brielle Sutton Asset Management. Allison's stomach dropped. She scanned the first email, then the second. Her hands started shaking. Brielle wasn't freelancing, Monica said quietly. She had a backer, someone who paid her to get close to Garrett, someone who wanted leverage. Allison looked up, her voice barely a whisper. Keane. Monica nodded. He set the whole thing up, the affair, the gala. He wanted to see if Garrett could be controlled. And when Garrett failed the test, Keane moved on to you. Allison's pulse pounded in her ears. Everything she thought she understood about the last 6 months shifted. Garrett didn't just cheat because he was weak or bored or selfish. He cheated because Keane engineered it. And Allison, quiet, overlooked Allison, had been the real target all along. "Why me?" Allison asked, her voice shaking. Monica's expression softened. "Because Keane knew what Garrett didn't. That you were the one with the power. He just needed you to realize it." Allison closed the file, her mind racing. She'd thought she was taking back control. But she'd been playing a game someone else designed. And now she had to decide what to do about it. Allison wasn't chasing revenge. She was chasing reimbursement. Caroline laid out the legal strategy like a battlefield plan. "We're not framing this as emotional damage. We're framing it as financial theft. Marital funds used for an extramarital relationship. Donor money redirected for personal gain. This isn't about heartbreak. It's about reimbursement." Allison nodded, her jaw tight. "We calculate every dollar Garrett spent on Brielle. Hotels, gifts, dinners, trips. We add the reputation damage, lost opportunities, public humiliation, the cost of rebuilding your name. Then we add the foundation funds he misused. And we present it as a claim." "How much are we talking?" Allison asked. Caroline slid a document across the table. "Conservatively, $400,000. If we include future earnings you lost because of his actions, it could go higher." Allison stared at the number. It wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. About making sure Garrett couldn't just apologize his way out of consequences. "Garrett's team is going to fight this," Caroline warned. "They'll argue it's punitive. That you're being vindictive. But here's the thing, every dollar we're claiming has a receipt. A timestamp. Paper trail. They can't argue with facts." Allison leaned back, imagining Garrett's reaction when he saw the filing. Imagining him in a conference room with his lawyers. Realizing he couldn't buy or charm his way out of this. The thought still warmed her. And she hated that it did. Because somewhere deep down, a part of her still wanted him. Still remembered the version of him that made her feel safe and loved and chosen. Still felt a pull toward the man he used to be, or the man she thought he was. But desire had never been proof of love. And wanting someone didn't mean they deserved you. Caroline's voice pulled her back. "There's one more thing. If we can prove Keane signed off on donor fund misuse, this becomes bigger than your marriage. It becomes a criminal investigation. Fraud. Possibly federal charges." Allison's breath caught. "You're saying Garrett could go to prison?" "I'm saying if Keane's involved, a lot of people could go to prison. And you'd be the one who brought it all down." Allison sat with that for a long moment. She didn't want Garrett destroyed. She just wanted him held accountable. But if accountability meant exposing a system that was corrupt from the start, she wasn't going to back down. "File it," Allison said. Caroline smiled. "Already drafted. I just needed your approval." She handed Allison a pen. Allison signed her name at the bottom of the document. Clean, deliberate, final. The claim was filed by 3 p.m. Garrett's legal team received notice by 4 p.m. By 5 p.m., Garrett was on the phone with his lawyer, his voice tight with panic. "She's asking for what?" His lawyer read the number again. Slower this time, like saying it louder would make it easier to accept. Garrett hung up and sat in his office, staring at nothing. He'd thought the worst was over. Thought the separation filing was the end. Thought Allison would take a settlement and disappear quietly. He'd underestimated her. Again. September. Fox. His phone buzzed. A text from Caroline, Allison's attorney. "If Keane signed off on GT development, this becomes bigger than your marriage. You might want to start talking." Garrett's hands shook as he read it. Because he knew exactly what Caroline was talking about. And he knew if that information went public, his career wasn't the only thing that would end. His freedom would too. Allison opened the envelope and realized Garrett didn't build his empire alone. The documents inside were emails, board correspondence, approval forms, all dated over the last 3 years. All signed by Dr. Harold Keane. Caroline stood behind Allison's chair, close enough that Allison could feel her presence, close enough that the air between them felt charged. But Caroline never touched her, never crossed a line, just stood there, steady and protective, offering support without demanding anything in return. And somehow, That respect felt hotter than any touch ever had. Allison's hands shook as she read. The first email was from Keane to Garrett, dated 2 years ago. Garrett, I've reviewed the Lincoln Park project. I'm approving the donor fund allocation under one condition. You bring me something I can use. Leverage. Insurance. You understand. Allison scrolled to the next email. Garrett's response. What kind of leverage? Keane's reply was short. The kind that proves loyalty. Show me you're willing to risk everything. Then we'll talk about your next project. Allison's stomach twisted. She kept reading. Another email. This one from Keane to someone Allison didn't recognize. Brielle Sutton is in place. Keep her close to Garrett. I need to see how he handles pressure. If he breaks, we move to Plan B. Plan B. Allison. She looked up at Caroline, her voice shaking. He set up the affair. Keane paid Brielle to get close to Garrett. This was all a test. Caroline nodded, her face grim. And when Garrett failed, Keane shifted his focus to you. He wanted to see if you'd fold or if you'd fight. The gala wasn't random, Allison. Keane wanted you in that ballroom. Allison's breath came faster. Why? Because you have the real power, the trust, the voting shares, the donor connections. Garrett was just the face. You were always the foundation. Allison felt like the room was spinning. Every decision she thought she made freely had been watched. Every move she made had been calculated by someone else. She scrolled to the last email in the file. Dated the week of the gala. If she shows up, we know she's ready. If she stays home, we know she's not. Either way, we'll have our answer. Allison's vision blurred. She closed her eyes and pressed her palms flat on the desk, trying to steady herself. Caroline's hand hovered near Allison's shoulder. Not touching, just close. You okay? Allison nodded, even though she wasn't. The night of the gala, Allison whispered. Keane was there, watching. He wanted to see what you'd do, and you didn't just show up, Allison. You won. Allison opened her eyes and looked at the last document in the envelope. A calendar entry, marked in red. Gala night, final assessment. The date was circled. The night of the gala was never random. It was never just about Garrett's lies or Brielle's ambition or Allison's courage. It was the night someone decided who held the real power. And Allison had passed a test she didn't know she was taking. Caroline leaned closer, her voice low and steady. What do you want to do? Allison stared at the documents, at the emails, at the proof that her entire life had been a game someone else designed. And she made a decision. I want to meet with Keane, face to face. And I want answers. Caroline smiled, small and sharp. I'll set it up. Allison closed the envelope and stood. Her legs felt shaky, but her resolve didn't. The gala was never random, and neither was she.